Hi, and welcome to today's Daily Chronicle. Today is Tuesday, December 9th, 2025. FBI agents sue after being fired for kneeling during racial justice protest. FBI officers are seen here taking a knee as demonstrators marched in June 2020 in Washington, D.C. during a protest over the death of George Floyd, a black man who died after a police officer kneeled on his neck for several minutes. 12 FBI agents were fired this year for taking a knee during a racial justice protest in the heated summer of 2020, are suing the Bureau and its director, alleging unlawful retaliation. The former special agents, who together have nearly 200 years of experience, once received awards for helping disrupt mass shootings, expose foreign spies, and thwart cyber attacks. But they say as elite federal law enforcement agents, they never received training on crowd control. Nor did they have riot shields, gas masks, or helmets when they faced down volatile crowds. In the streets of Washington, D.C. in June 2020. The lawsuit filed in federal court in Washington on Monday described a small group of FBI agents as vastly outnumbered and literally backed against the wall of the National Archives building as unrest swept the country over the murder of George Floyd by a Minneapolis police officer. Court papers said they kneeled not to reflect a left-wing political point of view, but rather to de-escalate a situation. That threatened to spin out of control. Mindful of the potentially catastrophic consequences, plaintiffs knew that a split-second misjudgment by any of them could ignite an already charged national climate and trigger further violence and unrest, said the lawsuit filed by former Justice Department prosecutor Mary Durham of the Washington Litigation Group, accused of lack of impartiality. The Justice Department Inspector General reviewed the incident in 2024 and found no misconduct. But the episode went viral on social media, attracting critics who cast the kneeling as a political act. Before he returned to the White House, President Trump also posted a negative story about the matter. Soon after new FBI Director Kash Patel joined the Bureau this year, the lawsuit said he began targeting the agents involved in the episode of the retaliation. Several plaintiffs were yanked from supervisory roles at the FBI. Officials launched a new investigation. The matter was still pending when they were all fired. In September, shortcutting typical procedures for FBI misconduct probes. In their dismissal letters, Patel wrote, "You have demonstrated unprofessional conduct and lack of impartiality in carrying out duties, leading to political weaponization of government." During his confirmation hearing, Patel told senators he would honor the internal review process, but the lawsuit accuses him of breaking that pledge of his own political purposes. The abrupt departure of the fired agents disrupted important work, including evidence collection in Utah following the assassination of conservative activist Charlie Kirk, and efforts to support the Trump administration's executive order on making the District of Columbia safe and beautiful, court papers said. The case alleges violations of the agents' First Amendment rights to free association and their Fifth Amendment right to due process. They're asking to be reinstated to their jobs and for back pay. The FBI declined to comment on pending litigation. Trump administration announces $12 billion in one-time payment to farmers. Dan Duffy uses tractor to plant soybeans on land. He farms with his brother on April 28, 2025. Near Dwight, Illinois, the Trump administration announced $12 billion in one-time payments to farmers in the wake of this year's tariffs hikes. On Monday, primarily targeting farmers who grow crops such as soybeans and corn. The move was outlined during a White House roundtable event featuring farmers affected as well as Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins. Trump touted the program in relation to the revenue the government is taking in as a result of his sweeping tariff program, and also referenced his popularity among farmers. What we're doing is we're taking a relatively small portion of that, and we're going to be giving and providing it to the farmers in economic assistance. And we love our farmers, he said. And as you know, the farmers like me, because, based on voting trends, you could call it voting trends or anything else, but they're great people. The move comes as the administration looks to address economic concerns from key Trump constituencies as the tariff effect play out, but also on the heel of trying few years for row crop farmers. Prices for row crops such as corn and soybeans have fallen in recent years, according to Farm Bureau, and prices for inputs have risen over time. However, tariffs have also driven costs up on those inputs, including machinery and fertilizer. The White House is calling the new policy the Farm Bridge Assistance Program. Saying it's intended to support farmers until Trump's economic policies, such as lowering some taxes and imposing stiff tariffs take greater effect. President Trump is helping our agriculture industry by negotiating new trade deals to open new export markets for our farmers and boosting the farm safety net for the first time in a decade. Today's announcement reflects the president's commitment to helping our farmers. Who will have the support they need to bridge the gap between Biden's failures and the president's successful policies taking effect, said White House spokeswoman Anna Kelly. The money will be coming from the USDA's Commodity Credit Corporation, which Trump also used to give farmers economic aid in his first term. Trump framed the new aid program as a part of his attempt to respond to concerns about high prices. In introducing the topic, Trump dismissed Democrats' recent emphasis on affordability. They have a tendency to just say, this election's based on affordability, and no one questions them. He said, nobody says, oh, well, what do you mean by that? They just say the word. They never say anything else because they caused the problem. But we're fixing the problem. Trump also said he would remove environmental regulations on large machinery, such as tractors, in an attempt to lower prices on those. Tariffs, however, have weighed on those manufacturers. John Deere earlier this year estimated that tariffs would cost it $600 million in 2025. Streptococcus pyogenes. Streptococcus pyogenes are gram-positive bacteria found in the respiratory tract of 30% of healthy adults. However, they can cause disease in people with weakened immune systems or if the strain has particular virulence factors. Some virulence factors found in most pathogenic strains, hemolysin, an exotoxin that lyses white blood cells by forming pores in their cell membranes. M protein, a protein that forms fimbriae that cover the surface of the cell. The protein prevents phagocytosis by the innate immune system because it blocks the access of complement proteins to the peptidoglycan. Because of the M protein, so having been previously infected with the strep bacteria, doesn't mean that your memory B or T cells can react against M protein the next time you're infected with strep. Hyaluronic acid capsule camouflages the bacteria, tricking the immune system into thinking it is a host cell. Host epithelial cells make hyaluronic acid as part of the extracellular matrix. Some diseases caused by Streptococcus pyogenes. Skin infections Strep throat, treatable with penicillin G. Strep is one of the few bacteria that is not completely resistant to the original B. lactam. If left untreated, strep throat can lead to infection of other tissues, and so to more serious diseases, like streptococcal pneumonia. Scarlet fever, streptococcal toxic shock-like syndrome. Involves a super antigen that leads to high fevers and a pink-red rash. Can be treated with penicillin. If untreated for too long, 3.5% of cases develop into rheumatic fever. Rheumatic fever can develop from scarlet fever that is not treated soon enough. An autoimmune disease that can lead to serious heart damage. M protein has an antigen that looks like a cardiac protein. Antibodies that recognize this M protein has a mixture of foreign epitopes and epitopes that look like host proteins, self-reactive antibodies can develop. Necrotizing fasciitis, flesh-eating bacteria. Infection leads to necrotic tissue. The infection can spread and destroy tissue so fast that you can die within a week. Usually involves a super antigen. So septic shock is usually involved too. Treated with huge amounts of intravenous antibiotics and antibodies, also with amputation. Scary, but really rare. Anthrax. Bacillus anthracis is a gram-positive spore-forming bacteria and is the only bacillus species that is an obligate pathogen. Outside of biological warfare, the most common form of anthrax is cutaneous infections that agricultural workers or leather tanners catch from farm animals. Different forms of the disease. Are not due to different bacterial strains with different virulence factors. They are just due to the same strain having access to different parts of the body. Cutaneous infections are largely curable if treated with antibiotics. Without treatment, 20% of people die because the bacteria escapes from the skin into the bloodstream. Gastrointestinal anthrax comes from eating meat-infected spores. It is rare but more lethal. The pulmonary form of the infection comes from inhaling spores. It is extremely deadly, though it can be readily cured if antibiotics are started within a day or two of exposure before symptoms appear. Unfortunately, symptoms can take up to 8 days to appear, at which point it's too late. Treating anthrax is difficult because the bacteria suppresses the activity of the immune system. Delaying symptoms until after enough toxins have been released to do significant tissue damage. Also, the first symptoms that appear are similar to the flu. So the correct diagnosis is often delayed. Antibiotics plus passive immunity are used to treat cases. Although vaccine is available, the vaccine can have serious side effects because it consists of several small doses of injected exotoxin. It is made from the cell-free media in which bacteria were grown. During pulmonary infections, macrophages engulf spores in the lungs. The spores germinate and kill the macrophages. The bacteria then escapes into the lymph nodes and blood. Lymph nodes are concentrated near the alveoli in the lungs, making anthrax much more infectious if the spores can penetrate deep into the lungs. Once the bacteria starts secreting significant amounts of toxins into the blood, you're toast. B. anthracis has a few types of virulence factors. Their purpose is to suppress the immune system and help the bacteria spread in the body. Enzymes that synthesize a capsule. This capsule prevents complement binding, protecting the bacteria from pore formation and phagocytosis. 2. Anthrax toxin, an AB type toxin. B binds to a receptor of the cell surface, binds either LF or EF, is then endocytosed. Acidic conditions in the endosome trigger PA to form a pore that the A part can pass through. A equals edema factor, EF, and lethal factor, LF. Both EF or LF can act as the A portion of the toxin. All anthrax bacteria make both. The A subunit binds to the B, is endocytosed, and gets transported by B across the endosomal membrane into the cytoplasm. EF is an adenylate cyclase that makes CAMP. This induces swelling, edema, and reduces the effectiveness of phagocytosis. LF is a protein that cleaves MAP kinase. This kills cells and induces most symptoms of anthrax. Killing macrophages helps the bacteria avoid the immune system. Killing endothelial cells makes blood vessels permeable. Aids to spread of infection. Once LF is at high concentrations in the body, it is hard to save a patient's life. Anthrax vaccines and drugs. Current U.S. vaccine, cell-free media containing exotoxins, antibodies to the B subunit, block binding of toxin to host cells, must be given in many small doses to avoid harm from LF to EF in the vaccine. Current vaccines cause adverse reactions in a small but significant number of people. Therefore, the vaccine is not given to the general population. Only tanners and the military. Potential vaccine being developed. B subunit that is expressed in E. coli. Potential drugs being developed. A drug that binds PA or LF and blocks their activity.